Welcome to the Lawyerist Podcast with Sam Glover and Aaron Street. Each week, Lawyerist brings you advice and interviews to help you build a more successful law practice in today's challenging and constantly changing legal market. And now, here are Sam and Aaron.
Hi, I'm Sam Glover.
And I'm Aaron Street, and this is episode 127 of the Lawyerist Podcast, part of the Legal Talk Network. Today we're talking with Joshua Browder, creator of the DoNotPay robot lawyer, about chatbots and access to justice. We talk about chatbots and access to justice and robot lawyers a lot.
As much as we can.
Holy shit.
Absolutely. Okay, so today's podcast is sponsored by Ruby Receptionists, and it's smart, charming receptionists who are perfect for small firms. Visit callruby.com/lawyerist to get a risk-free trial with Ruby.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Clio Legal Practice Management Software. Clio makes running your law firm easier. Try it for free today at clio.com.
To be clear, every chance we get, we are going to talk about robots, artificial intelligence, and anything else science fiction-y. Because it's awesome.
There's no doubt that it's awesome. The question is whether or not it is actually relevant yet.
No.
The amount of hype that the universe, let alone our podcast, gives to chatbots and robot lawyering is so far ahead of where those things actually impact people's lives in 2017.
Although, to be fair, as you'll hear, DoNotPay has helped, I think, hundreds of thousands of people get rid of parking tickets.
It is nuts.
It is nuts, yeah. But I hear what you're saying, and I fully agree that chatbots are early on in hype.
Yeah, so Gartner, the market research company, has what they call the hype cycle, and they've got a variety of hype cycle reports that you can find online about different technologies or industries, and they've kind of coined this concept of a hype cycle, which is this graph that over time peaks really quickly at the beginning when there's all sorts of frothy market hype about early adopters and new technology, and then crashes when people realize that it doesn't actually live up to all that hype. And then the technology actually matures and adoption from mainstream normal people comes back and then starts to grow and grow and grow. And they call this kind of repeated pattern the hype cycle. And like any good business theory, it has all sorts of really hokey, cliched
trademark
names.
terms.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so they've got the innovation trigger and the peak of inflated expectations and the trough of disillusionment.
So we're at the peak of expectations, shortly to descend into the trough of disillusionment.
I think it's fair to say that robot lawyering right now is at the peak of the frothy front end,
yes.
And that we're going to come down to reality soon. And then this technology will actually mature and start solving people's problems and become a real thing, which will have huge implications for the practice of law. But robot lawyers and chatbots have not yet destroyed law practices.
And ideally won't, and will instead empower them. The hype cycle, another way, I think is more or less summed up by a great phrase that somebody else used that I can't remember who, but they said technology doesn't get really interesting until it gets boring. You know, like smartphones were really amazing, but kind of sucked until they finally got sort of streamlined and figured out. And now everybody has one and we don't even think about it. It's just normal. And it's mind-boggling what we can accomplish with them. But they're kind of boring now.
Yeah, and like in the context specifically of chatbots, like I've tried a couple on Facebook Messenger and they're cute.
Yes.
And I've even found a couple that were like interesting and useful, but they aren't something I install and use every day.
Do you have an Alexa?
I do,
or an Echo, whatever they're called.
Yeah,
Echo,
I
right?
do. I've had it for many months, and I use it for almost nothing. When I can't get my Sonos app on my phone to work properly, then I will use my Alexa Echo to play music for me, and that's it. Yeah. That's literally all I know how to, because I don't need recipe ideas or trivia games by voice or... I guess I could get weather reports. I really can't figure out why people think it's an important technology right now. I can see where it's going.
I use Siri a fair amount, although I've changed it to a British man so that I have a butler instead of a female servant. So I got that going on.
So there's that.
Yeah.
Wow. So this podcast.
I'm with you though. Like, I think chatbots have a lot of potential as one way that people may interface and get help on legal matters at some point. And Joshua Browder, as you're going to hear, is about to release a whole slew of new bots, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'm really excited for both what he's doing and where this stuff is going. The fact that we are talking about chatbots again on this show is us leading to the peak of inflated expectations.
That's true, we are. But I promise next week we're not talking about chatbots.
Oh, yay.
But that said, let's hear more about chatbots from Joshua Browder.
Hi, my name is Joshua Browder, and I'm the founder of DoNotPay, a chatbot that helps consumers with their legal issue and hopefully replaces exploitative lawyers.
Very cool. Joshua, in addition to the chatbot, well, you built that while you were in law school, I think, right?
Actually, no, I built it in between high school and university. I started driving at the age of 18 and I got a lot of parking tickets. And so the first product helping people with their parking tickets was actually out of personal necessity.
Oh, very cool. Well, give us some more of the background. Like, were you fighting those parking tickets on your own then, or were you doing it with lawyers, or did you just start out building DoNotPay for yourself, or how did that all work?
So when I turned 18, which is the driving age in the UK, I really was a terrible driver, and I would drive to school every day, and the parking tickets would just stack up. And after about the fourth ticket, my parents said to me, "You're on your own. You have to pay for your own fines. We're not going to help you out anymore." And so out of necessity, because I couldn't afford to pay them myself, I had to figure out the reasons to get parking tickets dismissed because I really couldn't afford to pay them. And I trawled through all of these government documents and I did a Freedom of Information Act request in the UK to find the top 12 reasons why parking tickets are dismissed. And then I began to think, does any of this apply to me? And I became a sort of local parking guru in my area.
That's amazing. So at some point, I think when I heard you speak at Codex, you said that you started helping out your friends and it sort of went from there.
Yes, I was shocked, but I was successful with my own tickets. And it wasn't long before all my family and friends were asking for my help. And it got to a point where I was copying and pasting so many documents back and forth that I thought instead of helping everyone individually, I should create some sort of app or robot lawyer to help people automatically.
So were you a software developer at that point? I mean, did you have any experience in programming, or were you learning on the job?
Yes, I love software. I've been coding for about 10 years now. And it's amazing what you can do just on your own. You don't have to rely on anyone else. You can create things that hopefully are used by a lot of people.
So you said that you set out to create this in part to help people so they didn't have to hire lawyers. Are parking tickets really something that people hire lawyers for? I mean, had you done that, or is it different in the UK? I guess I'm just not sure about that.
Well, when I started out, it was more helping people fight the crooked local governments. I admittedly wasn't the best driver and got a large number of tickets legitimately, but about half my tickets were actually unfair. For example, the signs were just so confusing, or the parking bays were legally too small. And I began to notice that local governments issue parking tickets not to punish people, but as a source of revenue, like almost replacing taxation. Mm-hmm. So the first product was mainly just helping people get out and fight the local governments. But then I began to realize that lawyers were also making the problem worse by charging hundreds of dollars, copying and pasting documents. And that's when I decided to expand to a dozen areas of the law.
Very interesting. And so what are the other areas of law that you've expanded to now? I think you had just done one or two the when I heard you speak over the summer.
So I started by taking on the airlines. If your flight is delayed or cancelled, you can get compensation if it's not related to weather. But previously, you'd have to go to a dodgy legal company who would charge you 50% commission of what you would get just for copying and pasting a generic appeal letter. So I automated that, and it works in a variety of things, helping to fight your bank in the UK, helping to fight your landlord if they're holding onto your security deposit or they're not repairing your property. It also works in helping the homeless in the UK claim government housing for free. And a few weeks ago, it was really exciting to expand to help refugees claim asylum in the UK, US, and Canada. Wow. And in the next few days, on July 10th, I'm launching in 300 areas of the law. Basically, everything that doesn't require going to court, hopefully DoNotPay can help with.
Very interesting. Wow. So maybe we should back up and talk about what DoNotPay is. It's usually described as a chatbot. Does that feel accurate to you?
Yes. So the way it works is you can talk to it like a real human being, which I think is really important because people often don't know what options to select and are surprisingly inarticulate at describing their problems. So it will ask you a few questions about your legal issue. For example, was the parking bay legally too small, or were you driving at the time? And then find a legally sound defense for your ticket. Once it knows a defense, it then takes down a few details and then uses those details to auto-populate a sound appeal letter, which it then sends directly to the local government.
So you don't have to do anything other than answer questions on the website.
Exactly, and it's completely free and automated. I think many legal technology companies in the past often would have a lawyer actually draft the document on the back end of the website. But this is really exciting because it's instant and it's free because it takes no cost to automate a document.
Is this the kind of thing where it's you have an expertise and so you are building this, or is this the kind of thing where anyone with sufficient knowledge of a legal set of procedures could probably create something similar?
I think it's really interesting because lawyers often say that programmers need them to help create products. Obviously, lawyers have an understanding of the law and programmers like to create things on their own and not get the help of lawyers. But I think it goes the other way around as well. Any lawyer obviously needs to have a programmer and someone who understands products and making like good software to actually make it accessible and usable. So I have a partnership with 3 paralegals, and I also am basing my technology off IBM Watson, which is really good because it means I don't have a PhD in machine learning, but it means I can create a really powerful conversational interface.
So Watson is kind of doing the heavy lifting behind the scenes.
Exactly. And that's great because it kind of democratizes technology. I think we're at an age now where you don't need to have a PhD in artificial intelligence to create really powerful things.
So when we were talking with Jason Velez, who also uses Watson to power his firm's chatbot that he's working on, I think he said that there's a per transaction cost. So I'm wondering where does the money to run DoNotPay come from? I mean, even if Watson doesn't cost, I'm sure you have hosting costs and things like that.
Yes. Well, I'm very lucky. I have an amazing relationship with IBM, and they're making Watson free for me. However, in terms of hosting, it's surprisingly cheap to host a website to hundreds of thousands or a couple million of people. If you do it right, it can cost below $1,000 a month, which is really amazing. I mean, it's a lot of money for me, and I've been fortunate to get some investors on board. But in the grand scheme of things, helping millions of people, that's a great cost.
Well, so I've wondered about that. Like, is there a plan to take what you've built or any aspect of it and spin it off into a business?
There really is, and I'm working on that at the moment. I believe to make it a true commercially sustainable operation, I need to make money. And I promised from the beginning that I would never charge users, and I intend to keep that promise. I think it will only work if people can get legal help for free and it's instant. But on the other hand, I wouldn't be against finding other ways to make it sustainable in an ethical way.
Well, yeah, because it strikes me like what the number of, I don't remember the number, the tens or hundreds of thousands of people who've used DoNotPay so far and gotten help through it. It's really impressive. But the cynical part of me is going, well, if it's free and it can't last forever, right? And so part of me would almost feel better about it if you were making more money. So yeah, it's good to hear that there's something in the works.
Definitely, and I think it will work. Basically, it's finding someone with no conflict of interest and getting them to sponsor individual bots. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if you one of the bots I'm releasing soon is a bot that can get you out of speeding tickets, and I've got the top driver education company sponsoring that bot. So obviously there's no conflict of interest because they're not interested in whether you get out of your speeding ticket or not. But they get this great branding of being associated with helping motorists.
So it'll be DoNotPay brought to you by driver ed company.
Well, there are going to be 500 bots. So every kind of company sponsors a different bot, or maybe there'll be a company-wide sponsorship. But I'm going to do it in a way that they have no access to anything. And it's really just the branding.
Wow. Okay, so 500 bots, you've talked about, there's a lot. How do you go about figuring out what problems this will work for? Or do you just assume that you can probably build something for just about everything?
Basically, I think the law can be broken down into 2 categories. Obviously, going to court is a separate issue, and I'm not tackling that at the moment. I think the first is document automation.
I like that you said at the moment.
Yeah, well, that's my next plan, but
Right.
we'll see. The first is document automation. For example, selecting variables within a document and making sure that you can create something based on some information. And then the second element is eligibility. Who is eligible for example, maternity leave or paternity leave, and figuring out who is eligible and then getting them to the document and hopefully creating that document in a way that gets the results that the users want.
What about, I mean, are you able to work in areas where they haven't turned on e-filing yet, for example?
Yes. So, I mean, I like to, as long as the user is empowered to take their document and submit it themselves, I'm going to be expanding in those areas. Obviously, there are lots of products where you can just call an API or connect to the local government's website, and that creates a better product on my end. But the user can also print out documents.
I think there are some services too where you can even just send them a document and an address, and they'll put a stamp on it and send it for a small fee. Isn't that right?
Yes, and I'm thinking of integrating with them, but ultimately I want to show to my users that I'm not charging you for any aspect of the process. I want to make it completely free. So even if they have to pay $2 to send it, that's too much for me.
Interesting. So why a chatbot? Why is that the right way to do this instead of filling out a form on a website?
So actually, DoNotPay also is a web form, and that was the initial version of the product for parking tickets. And I learned a few things from that. The first is that even if a defense will apply to a user, they're not going to select it. For example, there are a million ways that someone can conceptually think that the parking bay was legally too small, but only one legally correct defense if you cite that it's below 180 centimeters in the UK. And so a chatbot is all about taking a user input and converting that to the legally sound defense. And whereas if it was a form with buttons, I worry that people wouldn't be able to select the right option.
So with the chatbot, you can use a more casual, like, what's your excuse? Is it that the parking bay was too small? And if they say yes, then you say, would you guess that the parking bay was too small by this amount or so? And you can more casually drill down to the actual problem that you can turn into something legally sufficient to enter into the document.
Exactly. And also at the beginning of the process, the user can describe any legal issue in his or her own words. So it's not even about yes or no. They can say, I got a parking ticket, or my bank overcharged me for an overdraft. And so translating that to a legally correct offense is the big challenge.
Very cool. I hate to stop, but I need to stop for just a few minutes so we can hear from our sponsors. And when we come back, I want to talk about best practices for chatbots, or maybe even what some of the pitfalls or negative parts of using a chatbot might be. So we'll be back in just a moment. This podcast is supported by Ruby Receptionists. As a matter of fact, Ruby answers our phones at Lawyerist, and my firm was a paying Ruby customer before that. Here's what I love about Ruby. When I'm in the middle of something, I hate to be interrupted, so when the phone rings, it annoys me, and that often carries over into the conversation I have after I pick up the phone, which is why I'm better off not answering my own phone. Instead, Ruby answers the phone, and if the person on the other end asks for me, a friendly, cheerful receptionist from Ruby calls me and asks if I want them to put the call through. It's a buffer that gives me a minute to let go of my annoyance and be a better human being during the call. If you want to be a better human being on the phone, give Ruby a try. Go to callruby.com/lawyerist to sign up, and Ruby will waive the $95 setup fee. If you aren't happy with Ruby for any reason, you can get your money back during your first 3 weeks. I'm pretty sure you'll stick around, but since there is no risk, you might as well try.
Imagine what you could do with an extra 8 hours per week. You could invest in marketing your firm, you could spend more time helping clients in need, or you could catch your daughter's soccer game. That's how much time legal professionals save with Clio, the world's leading practice management software. With Clio, tracking time, billing, and matter management are fast and easy, giving you more time to focus on what really matters. And Clio is a complete practice management platform with plenty of tools and over 50 integrations to help you automate daily tasks such as document generation and court calendaring. See how the right software can make it easier to manage your practice. Try Clio for free today at Clio.com.
Okay, and Joshua, so one of the reasons I'm talking to you is not just that I had already heard about DoNotPay, which of course I had, but I saw you speaking on a panel at Codex. You were on a panel with Joshua Lennon from Clio, who I thought raised some really interesting issues that you had great answers to all of them, I think, but it made me think about sort of best practices. And I'm wondering kind of like, I can see the problems if somebody just goes out and tries to build a chatbot for a particular document in their jurisdiction and forgets to say, make sure that the chatbot will tell people who are from different states that they probably can't use that form. And so I'm kind of wondering, on a similar vein, like what are some of the things that really need to be in any chatbot tool that somebody is going to create to solve legal problems?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we're in the wild west of legal chatbots at the moment.
I've got an image now of just a bunch of digital things duking it out with spurs.
Exactly. And so DoNotPay, I like to think that DoNotPay was the first leader in legal chatbots. No one was really doing it before us. And when we kind of had our success with parking tickets, all of a sudden there were hundreds of chatbots doing all sorts of things.
You get a lot of people really excited.
Exactly. And I think there's two main things that chatbots should have. The first is escalation procedures. So for example, if you're helping a chatbot to help small businesses incorporate, you need to make sure that if the legal issue is too complicated, there should be a law firm on the back end that you can refer them to. It's not good enough to say, sorry, I can't help you, because that discourages people and ultimately achieves the opposite of what you want to achieve. Chatbots should improve access to justice and not discourage people from seeking legal help. And then the second thing, which I think you mentioned, is that localization is important. So, for example, when I launch, you won't see any of the San Jose parking laws if you're in Los Angeles. It's about finding where the user is and making sure that only the local laws or the laws that apply to them are displayed, because otherwise it can get really confusing and again achieve the opposite of what you want to achieve.
And are you doing that by asking or by making a guess based on their IP address? Making
a guess based on their IP address. And you can make just on the state basis even can be extremely helpful.
Yeah. Huh. This popped into my head that I use a VPN and my websites often think I'm from Canada, and I'm wondering how that might throw a monkey wrench in there.
Yes. Well, you can override the system by talking to it. Obviously, VPN, I've looked at the statistics and I think it's worth it to do it based on IP address to improve the user experience, but you can override it.
Gotcha. Let's say most of our listeners are probably lawyers, and my guess is that the hype about chatbots has now penetrated their psyches so that they're thinking about it anyway, even if they hadn't heard of it before now, they probably are. What would you say to a lawyer who's like, man, there are problems that I really could address for my clients, maybe even problems that lawyers ordinarily aren't able to charge much for, or that they feel like they could just reduce and they want to do it as a service. What would you say to somebody who's just thinking about it? How should they get started?
I think find someone, either learn yourself. There are so many great coding resources online, Codecademy, code.org, or find someone technical who can help you with the product. Because I think the greatest irony is the access to justice websites that have previously existed are some of the least accessible websites out there. They're terribly designed and they don't really work that well. So a lawyer should really find someone or get the skills themselves to make something that's useful, because something can have the best legal terminology and the best documents, but if no one can use it, then it's not very helpful. So just getting that coding right and finding someone technical to help.
What I guess on the line of coding, what is DoNotPay actually built in?
So it's built in Node.js and JavaScript and PHP with connected to IBM Watson. And that's been really helpful for me because they're great languages.
Do you do it all yourself?
I have done it myself in the past, but I'm just starting to scale up at the moment. So hopefully I'll be hiring soon.
Well, I'm wondering because are your 300 bots in 300 different areas of law, or are some of those overlapping?
So I figured out a way to automate the automation by creating a decision tree builder for eligibility and a document automation builder for actually creating the documents. And at that point, I then, a couple of weeks ago, hired 3 paralegals, 2 in the US and 1 in the UK. And so in working with them, we're using my tools to expand to 300 different areas of the law.
So how long from I'm going to do this to 300 new areas? What was the time frame there?
So DoNotPay is around 2 years old, and I finally realized that the only way to make it big is to work through everything. As I said before, the chatbot space for law is a wild west, and you have so many confusing areas that some chatbots work in and others don't. But I think if I can work for everything that you would expect it to work for, then that can create a lot of trust, which is necessary.
That's a really good point. I mean, trust is how do you get people to trust your website? I mean, you're not endorsed necessarily by anything. It's just sitting out there. How do people know that they're going to get what they want out of it?
Well, I think it's two things. The first is I'm not exploiting people and it's completely free. And so there's not a lot in it for me apart from making sure that it works. And then the second thing is just testimonials everywhere in the press and also word of mouth and social media. And the ultimate success is when someone gets out of their parking ticket or successfully fights their landlord. And at that point, that person just becomes the greatest product advocate that anyone could ever hope for. And they tell all their friends that this free service got me out of my parking ticket. And that's how I grew initially, not by paying for any marketing or anything. I've spent zero on marketing, but that's how I got 300,000 users, just word of mouth and just ensuring that everyone kind of talks about it and loves the product.
So of the 300 new bots that you've got coming out, what areas of law do those cover?
So on a higher level, everything that you would expect not going to court for. So that means claiming maternity or paternity leave from your employer, getting out, finding a loophole in your gym contract, parking tickets, speeding tickets, all sorts of transportation related stuff. Airlines overbooking. In the UK, there's this issue recently. We had this tragic disaster with an apartment building blowing up. So helping with fire safety. It's just incredible.
So it sounds like a lot of this stuff are sort of administrative issues, administrative complaints, or dealing with companies, or I know in my city, tenant complaints against landlords, there's not a whole lot that you can do apart from sending letters and kind of hounding people. So it sounds like you're covering a lot of that type of stuff.
Exactly. And also stuff where you don't have to attend court, but you can file a document to the court to look at remotely. So, for example, if in the UK or US, a company sells you something and the product just doesn't work, you can, the consumer protection laws, you can complain to them and get a refund.
So what's next for you? I apologize for not knowing this, but I accused you of being in law school. Are you still in college then, or are you graduated and getting ready to do this as your full-time job, or what's the plan?
So I'm working full-time over the summer. I just finished my sophomore year at Stanford, and So we'll see how it goes over the summer.
You're not saying you'll go back to Stanford necessarily?
Well, I don't know either way. Stanford is just the greatest place. I love it.
Very cool. It's not atypical for a Stanford student who's had some success as you have to think about just lining up a startup and going off and doing that way. Do you feel like DoNotPay is the kind of foundation that you could actually build a larger services platform on?
Definitely. I think that if I can make it commercially sustainable, then I'm onto something really powerful. But that's an important question, and we'll see how it goes.
So I'm out of questions, but I am just fascinated by what you've done, and I can't wait to see where you go. And thanks so much for giving us a larger window into DoNotPay and where it's headed.
Thank you. I'm really excited.
Make sure to catch next week's episode of the Lawyerist Podcast. If you'd like more information about today's show, please visit lawyerist.com/podcast or legaltalknetwork.com. You can subscribe via iTunes or anywhere podcasts are found. Both Lawyerist and the Legal Talk Network can be found on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and you can download the free app from Legal Talk Network in Google Play or iTunes.
The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own and do not represent the views of, nor are they endorsed by Legal Talk Network. Nothing said during this podcast is legal advice.